Hello, everyone. I'm Svetlana Darche from West Ed, and I'm a partner with from West Ed and UC Berkeley in the Globe Mission Earth program project as part of the SciAct. Whoops. And I'm going to talk to you about this online course that we developed. This is our agenda. I'm going to compress it a little bit so that we have plenty of time for any questions and answers. Many of you know about the course, but there's some people on who haven't seen it yet, and we would love to be able to engage with you. So we're going to do a quick overview. We're going to then look at the course itself. And most importantly, we want to share, Jody, Sarah, and Laura, and Kevin will talk about the pilot that they did, actually using this course in a facilitated way with a group of teachers this summer. And then we'll talk a little bit about next steps. So going on to the meat of this. Most of you know what Globe Mission Earth is, so I won't spend any time on it, but we're collaborative, as you know, and this course was developed with some supplemental SciAct funding from NASA, specifically to explore opportunities for scaling Globe in a cost-effective way, given that we all spend so much time orienting teachers. So the purpose of the structure of the course was to create a welcoming and guided asynchronous entry to Globe. As you all know, the DIS has done an incredible job of making the Globe website more user-friendly. When we first conceived of this a couple of years ago, it wasn't quite there yet, and it's already much stronger. So the idea is that the course we coordinated with Jen's office and with the DIS to make sure we weren't being duplicative, but we were pointing people toward the website wherever possible. So again, as I mentioned, it's intended to facilitate scaling. It incorporates other NASA resources like My NASA Data. We wanted to be able to at least begin integration of the resources into curriculum. So you'll see how that works toward the end of the course, and really focusing on the entire research process. So it's not just about the data collection and data entry components of Globe. And it's got 12 modules, as I'll show you in just a moment. Okay, here are the 12 modules. So the first 3 modules or so are introductory. And we'll talk about this a little bit more in a few minutes. Then there's sort of a transition module 4 that really talks about the research process and orients people to the rest of the course, which is science oriented. And as you can see, modules 5 through 8 really cover each step in the Globe research process, from observing the world all the way to constructing explanations and communicating results. And then the last 3 modules, or 9, 10, and 11, are really action-oriented so that the learners can actually begin to implement what they've learned in the course. At least try it out, right? At least think about what a timeline would look like and surface questions that they may have and so forth. And then there's a celebratory and certification module at the very end. Before I go any further, I also wanted to point out that there were a group of advisors. We'll talk a little bit about this further, but Jen was one of the advisors. Haley provided really valuable input, as did Tracy and others. So we'll talk more about that, but just wanted to thank Jen, which I didn't do when I started. Okay. The learning design, I'm going to skip over this. Just want you to know that our attempt was to make it as reflective of multiple backgrounds, as learning rich, as interactive as possible, and self-paced, and offer this opportunity for the learners to actually begin to implement what they're learning along the way. And thanks to Tracy for particularly urging us to make it as action-oriented as possible. So this is the Globe research process, as you know. We'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. This was the timeline for the launch. We're on target. We're sort of toward the end of summer of 2025. I'll talk to you about each of the stages here. We had input at multiple steps. So we had a draft and then lots of input from key experts like Tracy and Haley and others who were very pointed in their remarks. We incorporated all of that. Then the important piece was we're actually working with teachers. Once we had a clean draft, we worked with 10 teachers. They were recruited from across the Globe Mission Earth community. And we got very positive feedback. It was a 2-month pilot. And the teachers all had an extensive uh, a form to provide extensive and detailed feedback, which we processed with all due diligence. So the kind of feedback we got were materials were great. They loved the resources and so forth. Then we went into a third phase, which was engaging with UT, and we were just so thrilled that the UT team thought to use the course as part of their summer professional learning offerings. And as you can imagine, Sarah and Jody and Laura, having a lot of experience themselves, had really good input as well. And so we took additional input from them. Now I'm going to go into the course itself. And got my, please kick me if I'm going too slowly. Just want to make sure. Okay, so the course I'm going to show you is the one that Jody, Sarah, and Laura, that the UT team implemented. It's exactly like the other course. They just got a copy of it, which is what we would do with any other group that wanted to facilitate a course. So if John or Mitch or anybody wanted to use this course with a group of their teachers, we're putting together a process for facilitating that. But you can see that these announcements, for example, were UT announcements. This is the homepage, and again, you see the modules here. Again, the first 3 modules are introductory. I wanted to point out that module 3 actually has teachers create an account, and there's an e-training submodule in there as well. So again, we're driving them to not just learning about Globe, but actually beginning to implement it. And hopefully the instructions, if they were doing it on their own, would be very clear. If they're doing it in a facilitated way, obviously they would be getting guidance from the facilitator. I'm gonna, module 4 is sort of the transitional module, and then you'll see modules 5 through 8 are science oriented, modules 9 through 11 are implementation oriented. So I'm going to start with module 4 to show you real briefly what that looks like, and then I'm going to hand it over to Sarah, who's going to talk about the science modules. So one thing I wanted to just point out is that each, you'll get to see this if you want to look at it. I don't want to spend too much time, but each of the modules has a sort of a rhythm to it. So there's an introduction with objectives and so forth, and then in most cases, there's a video with somebody of note or somebody that we wanted to represent in here. Nate is one of the people. There's a variety of people who are we invited to produce videos, small, short clips, right, to talk about that particular subject. So Kevin was the first one. Urban Heat Island was the theme that we used, but it's not intended to be about Urban Heat Island per se. It happens, I think, worked well for the UT team, but what we wanted to do was just provide coherence across the entire course. Each of the modules also has a journal entry. In most cases, it has a story that's related to a student who might be involved in that stage of the research process. And it also has some teaching tips in that area. So this is the slide that I wanted to, excuse me, the module that I wanted to show you. Again, the research process provided the organizational scaffolding for the rest of the course. So we have observing the world being module 5, asking questions and developing hypotheses and so forth, planning and carrying out investigations, and all the way through to communicating conclusions in module 8. So we combined a few of them, obviously. Each one of them also has going deepers. So we tried to keep it pretty high level, assuming that most of the teachers who were going to be taking this course were going to be new to Globe, even though they might be seasoned teachers. So the going deepers provide additional information, but we didn't want to make that too overwhelming. Okay, so I'm going to hand it over to Sarah.
Svetlana has actually touched on the vast majority of what I was going to say, kind of highlighting what comprises the modules. So like we were saying, there's an introduction at the beginning. Here in this version or in this module, we have Jessica that gives a quick kickoff to observing. And if Svetlana goes to the next page, she's just going to have it cycling through. But as you can see, we have some introduction. We have some examples of the nature notes. The blue box is a student persona. We have that going deeper, which are additional things that teachers could dig into with things like NGSS alignment. Then we have these action steps that prompt teachers to not just like look at the documents that we've provided, but to actually like test something out either in their classroom or in their own personal time. And then they have a journal option. And this is pretty consistent throughout the rest of them. And then if we jump to the next page, it is those teaching tips. I'm so sorry if you can hear my cat. He will not stop screaming. It is dinner time. But then these are those teaching tips that we have for each of those modules. So this is pretty consistent across all of the 5 through 8 modules, where we have that introduction. We have a video from a subject matter expert. Then we get into a little bit of the meatier content. Sometimes there are more videos and there are journals and other prompts.
Right.
So yeah, those are the modules. And like I said, or like Svetlana said, it is tied directly to that GLOBE research process. So
Yeah, so I will click through a few. Maybe I will go back now to the presentation slides because I want Jody and Sarah and Laura to be able to talk about their experience. Yeah, so Jody,
Take it?
Sarah, yeah,
Yes.
take it away.
All right, I'll go first. Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. I am Laura Kubiak, as Jen enthusiastically greeted me in the beginning.
Mhm.
So I am a teacher for Toledo Public Schools in Toledo, Ohio, USA. And I've been a Globe teacher, originally trained with Globe Missioner at the University of Toledo like 10 years ago. So I've been doing Globe in my classroom for a while. And I think that's one of the reasons that I was recruited to be one of the 10 teachers that Svetlana was talking about who piloted the course. So I was already interested. I enjoyed piloting it. I thought highly of it. And then the next step was that Sarah M invited me to co-facilitate the launch with UT. So here we go. It went really well overall. We taught for 6 weeks. And by we, I mean, as Svetlana mentioned, Jody and I were the two main facilitators with Kevin as our subject matter expert. And we also met with Sarah quite a bit, and she joined in facilitating some of our classes. So this was sponsored through University of Toledo as a summer professional development for teachers who participated really all over the US. We had teachers from several states, not just the Midwest by us, but we did have a handful from my district, Toledo Public Schools. 26 teachers were enrolled, and it took place for 6 weeks in June and July, taking a break, of course, for the Globe annual meeting. We had virtual Zoom meetings and then also assignments in between those Zoom meetings. Let's see. And we collaborated, of course, with West Ed. Once this course was up and running, Svetlana and some of her team popped in to say hi and observe. And they were documenting. And of course, they surveyed our participants at the end to get feedback on how to make it even better. But everything, I think, went very well. And one other thing that I think is really cool is that we had teachers ranging from elementary first grade teachers all the way through middle school, high school, and then even one ecology professor from Kent State. So we had a really broad variety of participants, which was one of my favorite things about it. So I'm going to hand it over to Jody to tell you a few more details.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. As Laura said, we taught for 6 weeks, June 16th through the 23rd, but we did take that week off for the Globe annual meeting. So that gave them time to work on projects. So it worked out really well. We met twice a week with them on Mondays and Wednesdays for just an hour each time, which if I were to say to do it over again, I would make that 75 minutes to 90 minutes. It just seemed like 60 was a little short for what we needed to do. We use the theme of urban heat islands because of all the work from U Toledo on urban heat. So that just seemed to make sense. Plus we were in the summer and it's materials and equipment that were very easy for our participants to get their hands on and to use along the way. So yeah, we sent out a mailing to many people and we ended up with, as we said, 31 that signed up, but I think 26 that actually started the course. And I would probably say about 19 that finished the course. So there was some people that left, and I think it's because maybe some of the expectations were higher than what they thought because this was associated with the Globe Mission Earth project and some year-long activity that was needed, and in order to be fully engaged to get the stipend and so forth, we needed to make sure that they had a good amount of contact with us. So I think it was a little bit more than maybe what some people wanted, but I think that the people who finished, like we said, and like the data will show, were really happy, and they were a great group to work with. It was a project-based approach, so the participants went through the modules, and we assigned modules to them, and we'll show you that in a moment. But all those modules were really working up to 2 course projects. The research project, where they really did what a student research project, but they did it as an adult citizen scientist, and presented to each other and got feedback from one another on the research project. And we thought that was really important so that they could lead their students through a research project. And then we had a Globe implementation plan to make sure that they could take all of the course content, think about it, and then shake out what was most relevant for them and the needs that they had, and create an implementation plan, so how they were going to enact these ideas in the upcoming school year. Next slide. And this is how we broke out the modules. Like we skipped one module actually, but we have in week 1, we had kind of what is Globe, modules 1, 2, and 3, just kind of introductory material. Week 2, we did doing science and collecting data. So they really learned how to, do the protocols that are related to urban heat, and also how to design a research investigation or a research plan. And then in week 3, we focused on data analysis and visualization. Week 4 was really that implementing plan, that implementation plan. And they had seen resources throughout the course that came right out of those course modules, like My NASA Data, Elementary Globe, etc. So then they were taking all those pieces and parts and putting it together into an implementation plan. And then in week 5, they presented out their Globe research projects. So that was just how we broke out the courses. It seemed to make sense for the modules and seemed to make sense for us. And I think it was a good pace. I think that worked well together to chunk it out that way. Mm-hmm. Next slide.
Oops, what am I doing wrong?
Back to Laura.
Okay, so how did it go? Well, we think that it went very, very well. We had a lot of positive feedback, and we got that feedback just by Jody and Sarah and I and Kevin talking in small groups with the students. We really developed a community. So there were a lot of kind of sidebar and small group and whole group discussions, and what the participants put in the chat box. The energy was excited and productive, and I think everybody enjoyed it. And then also, just like emails on the side from participants, we had a lot of people just saying that they got a lot out of it. Like I said, I'm pretty lucky being with Toledo Public Schools. I didn't really expect this to happen, being a facilitator, but what ended up happening, one thing for me, was that I was able to network with lots of other Toledo Public School teachers. So I've already been making plans. Jody, I didn't even tell you this. I've already been making plans with some of the other teachers to get our students together and have them collaborate on Globe projects. So that's really cool. And I know I'm just an example of that. I know that other teachers throughout the course are going to be doing that this upcoming school year. So despite whatever happens with funding, I mean, there's just some things with Globe, this network that cannot be broken. We are very connected, and Sparks bonded us together. I think that this pilot group was very, very lucky to have Jody as the lead facilitator. I mean, she set the tone to be very positive and easy to work with her and each other, and just kept the pace going. I personally was inspired by her, and I know that a lot of others were as well. So I know that there will be future Sparks courses that will happen without Jody, but we are the very, very lucky ones to have her leadership. So I'm grateful for the opportunity, and you can see these quotes here that, I mean, this is, I told you anecdotally how positive it was. And also we have documented from exit tickets some very specific quotes that were also shared on a poster at the annual meeting. Participants rather, were complimenting not just how great they thought that Globe is and how adaptable it is and flexible it is, they also were complimenting the facilitation and the way that Sparks has been set up by West Ed and through Canvas and with the syllabus. So all parties that were involved in this pilot, I think, can be commended, because this feedback shows it loud and clear. They are the last one I think is inspiring. I'm excited to, oh, sorry, I have a pop-up. I'm excited to now be able to contribute to something much larger than myself. I'll leave you with that. I think that's a pretty big takeaway. So thank you for the opportunity.
Wow. Yeah, thank you guys. And I was so impressed on the 2 sessions that I sat in on, both with the facilitation and the responsiveness and engagement of the participants. It was really, really not only heartwarming, but just exciting to see that there was a hope that they were actually going to go forth and actually do something. That's what's important. And they were excited to do that. I just wanted to add that there is a section in the course itself called I Used to Think and Now I Think, and I happen to have just looked at that briefly before we got on today, and there's some additional comments there that are really worth looking at if anybody ever wants to do that. Okay, final kind of couple of slides, and then we'll go to a Q&A. So the experience that the UT team, we're all just back in town in the last couple of days. So we're going to be compiling the syllabus materials that Jody put together, along with a document that we started to develop, which kind of helped to define who's going to be doing what under different circumstances. So is West Ed doing the technical part, who's doing the facilitation and so forth. And compiling those documents with a little intro and some flyers and things like that into a little implementation guide. We have now a standalone version of the course, which requires no license, and we're in communication with both Jen's office, but also with the GIO to find out where that link will live. And right now it's available through the West Ed website, and it will be as long as necessary. It seemed as if the GIO was interested in connecting it to Mighty Networks, but we'll have to see. There's no commitment yet there. But so hopefully it will go. And I encourage you, I can come back to this slide, but we ended up putting a QR code. This leads you to a little survey, which gives us information about whether to send you a link to the public version of the course. So if anybody wants to take a snapshot of this, but I think the slides will also be available, so you can do that later if you want to. And just a few next steps. future possibilities. So we clearly want to continue to work with Jen's office and with the GIO to make this more available. One of the things we didn't talk about too much, and I won't go into any detail, but there's lots of ways to use this course. And in some cases it's purely introductory. So Lorraine, for example, if she were to do a training in New Mexico and she's just able to give them a taste, but there's teachers that actually want to, engage with more seriously, she would get access to the public version of the course, or she would be able to facilitate a course herself, and she could, use the Jody syllabus as an example and modify it as needed and actually implement it, and then, pursue any further steps with more individualized support if there were resources and so forth. But the idea is that it could be a very light touch, or it could be used in this more in-depth sort of way. So we also recognize that even once we decide where the course is going to live, that we need to make sure that people have accurate information about how to find it, what to do with it, and so forth. And then there are obviously some additional possibilities. When we first wrote this little grant to NASA, this proposal, we had a long list of all the modules that could be included, and we pared it all the way down to just sort of the bare bones of the research process. But clearly there could be other investigation areas beyond urban heat island that are used as examples. We could have more going deepers. We could also have some additional themes like civic engagement, career technical education, lots of possibilities. And of course, those are dependent on funding, but we are optimistic. So I'm going to just go to the very last slide, which is basically, does anybody have any questions or answers? We'd be more than happy to answer any questions you have and, engage in any discussion.
There's been some questions and answers in the chat.
Oh,
So I didn't
okay.
know if anybody wanted to bring up more or go back on one of those other questions.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to look on at those. Does anybody want to just highlight a couple just so we know?
I think most of them have been answered. Amani, did you have other questions, or have your questions been answered?
Yes, for the most part, my questions have been answered. Is the study is over now? Is it now open for everyone else to participate?
Right, exactly. So thank you for that clarification question. We have a public version of the course. So if you saw the QR code, if you were to just point your camera at that, it would take you to a little, 3-question or 4-question survey monkey questionnaire that just basically just asks who you are. And then we will send you a link to the public version of the course, which gives you total open access with no license requirements or logins or anything like that. So then you could use the course. You could also share it with others if you wanted to. Alex, do you have anything that you want to add to that? Are you still there?
No, I'm here. I mean, I think
Yeah.
I,
Mhm.
I think you kind of got it. I'm
Okay.
not afraid to prattle on, but I think you kind of
Yeah.
nailed it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Is there a source that you have for the infrared sensors?
For the infrared thermometers?
Yeah, I
Yes.
think we just
Kevin.
sent out something like Amazon links to the teachers and they purchased the instruments. Maybe Sarah, did we do this meat thermometers, and Jody, Laura, did we do meat thermometers too?
Yeah, we recommended meat thermometers and IRTs.
Thank you.
Okay. I was also curious, David Paget, I was really glad to see you here, if you're still there. One of your teachers was one of the pilot teachers I know, and we were hoping that this might be of interest in a pre-service environment as well, or in your geography class or something. And I was wondering if you had any further thoughts about that.
Yeah, I would definitely assign this, in my pre-service classes. I wish that Dr. Newsom was still at Tennessee State,
Mhm.
but she isn't. I don't know if she's going to be replaced. So yeah, I'll see if I have any pre-service teachers in my classes this fall, and we'll see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the idea is you can just provide a link and have people take it, but then if you want to do a guided process of some kind where you're pacing them, over the course of a specific time period, that's when you would use the facilitated version. And in that case, there's some modest license fees for Canvas and so forth, but it's not expensive. And it enables you to track individual students who are participating in the course.
Svetlana, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So I was just saying, so Dr. C and I spent the day at a STEM academy, a local elementary school, working with some returning teachers, some new teachers, but we are just one of a handful of community partners. So it's not just about Globe, right? It's the Metro Parks, the Toledo Zoo, their Prairie program. So I would like to share that QR code with that group in case they want to follow the course to dive even deeper on their own into Globe. But then I was thinking, well, why not just share it with all of our teachers, which could be a large list just in case anyone want to, get into it. But is that too many? Do you want me to limit how many people I send it to?
I don't think there's any need to limit it, but the whole idea of creating a public version of the course is that it is unlimited access. So,
Okay.
Alex, do you have anything you want to add to that?
I would just say
Mhm.
send it to all teachers. I wouldn't limit like 10, everyone you could think of. Just send it
No,
because
yeah, just our teacher list. Yeah.
yeah, just send it, share it.
Okay.
There's no again, knocking on profuse amounts of wood, there's no scale issues that we've ever encountered. So go for
Okay.
it.
On
The more the
that,
merrier.
on the form that the QR code directs you to, is there like a basic introduction description of what it is? Or do you guys, I don't remember, do you guys have a one-pager flyer thing that I could also include in the email?
Sure. Well, we were actually, Sarah, that's part of that little packet that we were going to put together was going to include, and we can send you the flyer that we developed. Let's make a note of that.
Yeah, I know we had that for our version, right? Our
Right.
facilitated one, but yeah, just for
Yeah,
the,
we have a generic one. We have a
okay,
generic one as well. So I
okay.
can send you the flyer, but I think the one point I would add is if you are going to send it to a large group of people, it might be a good idea just to give us a heads up that you're going to do it so that, we can be mindful of just making sure that we're responding on the back end, right? Because the surveys are gonna land in a West Ed email box. And what I wanted to do is just share briefly. I actually had it open earlier myself. So you had asked what kind of information. So it says, I don't have this handy, but you guys can open it up. I don't know if you can see my phone. Anyway, it has welcome to our Sparks course access survey. It doesn't give a whole lot of introduction to the course. That is something that we could add, or we could possibly, I don't know if we could add a link to the flyer right here. I'd have to talk to the team on who knows better how the technology would work. But basically, it's just first and last name and email and where they're located, and a little bit about their interest in the course, and whether there's a question whether they would like us to follow up with them as well. And as soon as they hit done, we will provide access to the course, but it's not automated yet. So we'll just need to monitor that, monitor the survey link so that
Okay.
it's responsive as possible. So if you're going to send it to a whole group of people, just give us a quick, just a quick heads up, and it's just so we know to be on deck to be as responsive as possible.
Right. Okay.
All right, everyone, it's 1 minute after we were supposed to end. So I'm gonna end this. Thank you very much for coming and to the Sparks development team and the implementation team. So Sarah, Laura, who I know left, Jody, thank you for implementing the course, and Svetlana and Alex and
Sarah and don't forget Kevin also. Yeah.
and Kevin and
Yeah.
Jessica and Rosalva and the whole darn
Exactly.
team. So thank you very much for developing the course, and we look forward to getting the word out about this for sure.